Did you know, in Texas, a person can work full-time, have no addiction, no criminal record, and still end up sleeping on the sidewalk? Not because they're lazy, but because one slip in the system can turn any one of us into a homeless person in just a matter of weeks. And the scariest part? You won't realize you're falling until you hit the bottom. It was an early morning in Fort Worth. A light rain misted over damp streets. On a bench outside the public library, a man named Michael slept curled up, knees pressed to his chest. Next to him was a worn-out fabric backpack and a pair of shoes with frayed soles. Just a year ago, Michael had a job. He was an HVAC technician, living in a small apartment with his dog, Marley. Every weekend, he walked Marley through the park, sipping coffee, dreaming of opening his own repair shop one day. Then Marley got sick. The vet bill was more than he could afford. Michael took extra shifts, burned out, and fell from a second story while installing equipment. A spinal injury cost him his job. No job, no rent. No rent, no home. No home, no Marley. And then, only the cold sidewalk and silence. Michael wasn't lazy. He worked 6 days a week, sometimes until midnight. He believed that if he worked hard enough, he'd never end up on the streets. But here's a truth most people don't want to face. In America, especially in Texas, you can do everything right and still lose everything. What we're witnessing is a silent collapse, not from war, not from natural disaster, but from a system that pushes people closer and closer to the edge, and they don't even know they're standing on it. In Austin, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment has climbed to $1,800 a month. Meanwhile, the federal minimum wage remains at $7.25 an hour, unchanged for over a decade. At that rate, a full-time worker spends over 60% of their income on rent, leaving little to nothing for food, health care, or emergencies. And the cruelest part? It only takes one minor event, a car breaking down, a sudden illness, a few missed hours of work, to push someone off the edge. Jordan was a warehouse worker in Houston. He had a steady job, a room he rented, and a routine. But when the plant suddenly cut hours, he lost nearly 40% of his income. He couldn't make rent that month. After just 1 week of delay, he was evicted from the place he had lived for 3 years. No close friends nearby, no family to fall back on. Jordan moved into his car. 1 week, then a month, until the police towed the vehicle for a parking violation. Then came the park bench. From worker to homeless, Jordan's fall took just 17 days.
What makes this collapse so devastating is that it's silent. No headlines, no alarms. No one knows when it will be their turn. We don't see people like Michael or Jordan on the news. They don't protest, they don't beg. They just exist, quietly, exhausted, and slowly disappearing from public view. And perhaps the most bitter truth? Many still believe it's their fault. That homelessness only happens to the lazy, the addicted, the irresponsible. But that's not always the case. Sometimes the only mistake they made was surviving in an economy that isn't built for the poor. And once they fall beyond the edge, once they become invisible, they begin to face an even more brutal reality: the absence of the most basic human needs: food, clean water, shelter, privacy. When was the last time you woke up and didn't know what you'd eat that day? For most of us, it might be a missed grocery run or a closed cafe. But for tens of thousands of homeless people in Texas, That's their reality, every single morning, with no guarantee they'll make it through the night. Jordan, the warehouse worker you met earlier, now starts each day by walking nearly 2 miles to a church offering free sandwiches. But there's not always enough to go around. And it's not always safe. Once, a group of strangers stopped him on his way and took both his food and his worn-out shoes. Just to get something to eat, I had to trade away my dignity and my blood, Jordan said, eyes lowered. In Dallas, a recent study found that 1 in 5 homeless individuals had been living on the streets for over a year, without access to toilets, shelter, or even a safe place to sleep. They use public park faucets to wash. They find hidden corners to relieve themselves because, if caught, they can be fined or arrested. Can you imagine what you'd feel like if you hadn't showered in 2 weeks? We met Sheila, a 54-year-old woman who once worked at a library. When her mother passed, the apartment, in her mom's name, was seized due to unpaid taxes. Sheila couldn't cover the costs and was forced out. "The worst part isn't hunger," she said. "It's feeling like I'm no longer a normal person." She sat beside her cart, filled with a few shirts and a tattered book she still reads every night. "People look at me like I'm trash. But I used to have a name. I used to have a library card with it on it." The cruelty of street life doesn't lie only in the cold or hunger. It's in having to fight for every basic need against others who are just as desperate as you. And in that chaos, acts we once thought of as shameful or unthinkable become necessary for survival. In Dallas, social service organizations report a 20% increase in public sexual activity and drug use in homeless communities over the last 2 years. Not because people are immoral, but because, for many, it's the only way to make it through another day. A sandwich, a dry place to sleep, one night of not being harassed. Sometimes the price for that is their dignity. And then, in the cracks of that broken world, pieces of humanity still remain. They're not just hungry for food. They're hungry for care, for someone to listen, for the chance to feel seen again. And when that pain stretches too long, too deep, many turn to one thing: drugs. Not to get high, but to forget. Forget the cold, forget the fear, forget that you're living as if no one sees you anymore. At first, I just wanted to sleep through the night without dreaming about the cold, without hearing cars rush by, without feeling like I was slowly dying every day. That's what Lisa told us, a 40-year-old woman from Houston, one night at a food outreach. She wore an oversized hoodie, clutching a paper cup, eyes hesitant, but honest. Lisa used to be a nursing intern. She never imagined her life would come to this, but after a motorcycle accident made it impossible for her to continue working, everything unraveled. No insurance, no family, no safety net.
In Texas, over 38% of homeless individuals struggle with substance dependency, according to a 2024 report from the State Department of Health. They didn't start as addicts. They started just like you and me, trying to cope with pain they couldn't put into words. And when the world turned its back, the only thing that didn't reject them was drugs. On the streets of San Antonio and the rundown motels of East Austin, the use of meth and opioids happens in broad daylight. No one hides it anymore. There's nothing left to hide.
"That stuff didn't make me happy," Lisa said, her voice low. "It just made me not sad anymore." She's been clean for almost 60 days now, thanks to a community recovery program, the only one that accepted her without ID. But the real problem isn't drugs. The real problem is this: only 1 in 5 homeless people struggling with addiction in Texas has access to treatment. That means the majority must fight their demons alone, in silence and under the weight of stigma. Society calls them problems, trash, menaces. But no one asks, how much pain must someone be in to choose to numb themselves every day? And in the middle of all this chaos, another more painful question emerges. When you're a woman with no shelter, no money, and no one to call, what do you have left to trade but your own body? Emily sat on the steps of an abandoned church in South Austin. She wore a denim jacket 2 sizes too big. Her hair was tangled, her face exhausted. When we asked her, "What's the biggest thing you've lost?" she whispered, "The right to choose. I can't choose who touches me. I can't choose who I trust. I can't choose to be myself." In Texas, it's estimated that in Texas, 1 in 4 homeless women has experienced sexual exploitation or survival sex. It doesn't show up in official reports. They don't file complaints. They don't speak up because maybe no one is standing with them. Emily used to be a fashion design student. She grew up in a working-class family, but there was love. Everything changed after her father died and her mother suffered a mental breakdown. No family left, no one to co-sign a lease. She lost her scholarship and was forced out of student housing. At first, she tried night shelters, overcrowded, unsafe, and sometimes even more dangerous than the streets. One rainy night, trembling outside a supermarket, a man approached her. "Just 1 hour. I'll give you a meal and a room for the night." Emily paused for a long time before telling us this. She didn't cry, but the shame in her eyes was heavier than any tears. She said, "I didn't want to do it, but I was hungry. I was scared. I had no other choice." So many homeless women fall into this trap, not because they lost their morals, but because society abandoned them first. No safe shelters just for women, no trauma support after exploitation, no laws strong enough to protect them, while local governments focus on cleaning up the streets instead of fixing what's broken. In Dallas, outreach groups have reported a 20% rise in exploitation and transactional sex among homeless women in the last 2 years. Not just a sign of desperation, but a sign that we're failing to protect the most vulnerable among us. And yet, even in the darkest places, sometimes a light appears. Emily was recently accepted into a community job training program where she's learning customer service skills, earning a small income, and reclaiming her self-worth. For the first time in 2 years, she said, with a soft glimmer in her eyes, "I don't feel like I'm just leftover. I'm starting to remember who I used to be, and I want to find that girl again." We don't share Emily's story to shock you. We share it so you know. Behind the streetlights, women are fighting to survive in ways they never imagined. And if no one stands with them, they will stay buried in silence. You might ask, "But I'm not homeless. Why does this matter to me?" It matters because homelessness is no longer a distant crisis. It's a growing fracture in our communities, and no one, not even you, is immune to its effects. The answer is, you can do a lot. And sometimes it's the smallest actions that make the biggest difference. Let's start with something simple. Don't turn away. Next time you see a homeless person by the roadside, try stopping. You don't have to give them money. Just see them as a human being. Smile, nod, say hello, ask if they need water. This isn't pity, it's recognition. It's dignity. It's saying, I see you. You can also volunteer at a local food station or a shelter. Just a few hours a week, but enough to change someone's day. Support trusted organizations doing the work, like the Other Ones Foundation in Austin, Haven for Hope in San Antonio, or Coalition for the Homeless in Houston. Share stories like this video with friends, co-workers, and family, because change starts with awareness. Write to your local representatives and demand more funding for affordable housing, mental health care, and recovery programs. Are you a business owner? Consider hiring people in reintegration programs. Many of them just need a chance, nothing more. Are you a teacher, a parent? Teach children about compassion. Helping others doesn't make us weak, it makes us stronger. Have you ever been in a similar situation yourself? Share your story. Because maybe, just maybe, it could save someone else struggling in silence. None of us can change the whole system alone, but each of us can light a spark. And many sparks together become a light.
Remember, James only needed someone to believe in him, to get up from that bus stop. Emily only needed a safe place to begin again. Michael only needed a chance to prove he was never disposable. And there are so many more waiting for someone to stop and say, I'm here and I care. You can be that someone. You don't have to be a hero. Just be kind. Now imagine this, a quiet morning in downtown Austin. No more sleeping bags scattered on sidewalks. No more children shrinking in fear when they see someone collapsed beside a trash can. Instead, you see a small community of tiny homes, laughter, trees, a man pouring coffee for passers-by, and you realize they used to be homeless, but now they're your neighbors. If we truly act together, not with slogans, but with commitment, this future isn't a dream. Texas is already showing signs of hope. Austin plans to house 3,000 people by 2028. Houston is expanding its housing-first model with hundreds of new units. Community initiatives are spreading from schools to churches, coffee shops to art studios. It's no longer just the government's issue, it's ours, all of us. Now imagine if Sarah, the single mom who once slept in her car with her daughter, now walks her child to school every morning from their own apartment. James, the veteran with PTSD, finds purpose again as a peer mentor for others like him. Maria, the young woman who once dreamed of just a bus ticket home, now works at a homeless welcome center, passing on the hope she once received. We can build a Texas where people are housed before they're employed, where affordable housing isn't labeled the slums, but a recovery community, where seeing a homeless person doesn't make us sigh, but reminds us there's still work to do. It won't happen overnight, but it begins with what you're doing right now. Listening, understanding, acting. We've grown used to thinking homelessness is permanent, but in truth, homelessness isn't destiny, it's a consequence. And if it's a consequence, it can be undone. If you've watched this far, then maybe in your heart you're already hearing the same thing we felt the first day we stepped onto the streets of Texas. We can't keep turning away.
On this journey, you've met Michael, a man who once had a job, a home, and a dog named Marley. Lisa, who fell into addiction not for pleasure, but to numb the freezing sidewalk. Emily, who had to sell her own body to survive and is now learning how to forgive herself. James, the veteran who found hope again through a tiny apartment and a photo of his son. You've also seen the light at the end of the tunnel, through programs, communities, and people who still believe we can do better. Over 27,000 people are living on the streets in Texas right now. But remember, they are not numbers. They are stories. They are memories. They are dreams left unfinished. They used to be cashiers, teachers, nurses, high school students. They used to have families, love, hope. And what they need most right now is not pity, it's a chance. We can't save everyone, but we can change someone's life, one person, one story at a time. By sharing this video, by volunteering a few hours this weekend, by raising your voice every time an unfair policy is passed, by teaching your children compassion, not just ambition. We don't need to be heroes to create change. We just need to be human, in the truest sense. If your heart is moved, if you saw someone in this video who reminded you of someone you once knew, if you believe that home shouldn't be a privilege but a basic human right, then you're already part of the change, right here, right now.
Leave us a comment below. Which moment in this journey touched you the most? And what will you do, even if it's small, to make sure no one has to go through what you just saw? Share this video with someone who needs to see the truth. Hit subscribe to follow us on this journey and hear the stories that often go untold. We can turn despair into hope. We can make the invisible seen again. And we can turn a heartless world into a community that cares. One story, one person, one action at a time. Thank you for being here. We are Contemplation, Life Story, and we won't stop.